Hi everybody, in this walkthrough we're going to look at our very first Java program, or what will be for most of you at least your first Java program, and talk about some of the differences between Java and Python, and also how we can look at running Java within our Eclipse environment here that we'll be working with throughout this unit. So I'm in Eclipse, and I have my project here which we set up previously. And you have, notice here, 4 different folders, and the only one that has anything in it currently is the one called Assignments, which has something called Student and Course Test.java. That one we don't need to worry about now. Just in general, though, know that you're going to be doing, for the time being, most of your work within these folders, if not all of it. So go ahead and feel free to, use these for the studios and exercises and assignments and walkthroughs and things like that. So when we tell you to start working on an assignment or to start working on a studio, you should be doing that work in these folders within your Java track project. Okay, so let's go ahead and write our first Java application. We're just going to do a simple Hello World application. And I encourage you to either code along with me here or to make notes and then go back and try to do this on your own after the video. You should definitely be doing these things, be able to be doing these things independently of the video as well. So in the exercises folder, I'm just going to create a simple Hello World application. In Java, recall that everything is an object. So we're only dealing with objects and classes. That's really the only kind of code that we can actually write. So in Python, we could create classes and then create objects out of those classes. Remember, classes are blueprints for creating objects. We did that, but we could also just write what you might just call simple procedural Python. In Java, even if you want to write simple procedural Java, you still need to do that within a class. So let's create a class. On the exercises folder, just go to right-click and go to New Class. And this will give us a little dialog where we can provide some information about the class we want to write. I'm going to name it Hello World. In Java, typically the convention is to capitalize classes and to capitalize the first word or the first letter of each word within that class name, if there are multiple words that make up the class name. We might use some of these other options later on, but right now all we need to do is enter the name Hello World. I'm also going to click this box down below that says public static void main. That's going to create an empty method, an empty main method for me, which is going to be important. We'll explain what that does in just 1 second. So I've got Hello World, I've got public static void main checked, and then I can hit finish. And Eclipse goes ahead and creates pretty much the minimum amount of code that's needed for this Java file right here. So let's look at the syntax a little bit. In Java, as opposed to Python, we don't really have the same white space restrictions in terms of indentation that we did. So anything that we do in Java, if we want to, say, delineate what code is part of a function or what code is part of a loop, we're going to do that with curly braces. So notice up here I have my class declaration. I have public class Hello World. Public says that this class can be used by anybody. We'll learn some different access modifiers, as they're called, later on. But most of the code we write is going to be within public classes. Class just says I'm about to create a class, and then Hello World is the name of that class. That class definition goes between 2 curly braces. So notice I have curly brace here to start my class definition, and a curly brace down on line 9 to end it. Within each class, we will have a collection of methods and properties. Properties are just, you think of those as variables associated with your class. They are pieces of data. Those can be ints or strings or arrays or more complicated things that are associated with your class. And then methods are functions that are associated with your class. So here we have one method. It's called main. Main is a special method in Java. If you've come from a language like C or C++, you might have seen main before. In general, as I mentioned, everything we do in Java is going to be class and object oriented. That means that we can't create code outside of the context of a class. Now that might seem restrictive, but we do have the opportunity to use this main method, and this basically says, the code within this method is going to be available to somebody to run if they want to run our program as if it was a simple procedural program. Okay, so Public static void, we don't need to get into the details of what those mean right now. We'll learn about each of those words. Void is the return type. We can say that at least right now. This means our main method isn't going to return any values. But in public, you might assume that that means the method is public. That's true. Static, we won't learn about that now, but you don't need to worry about that currently. Same with string args. We'll return to what those pieces of this mean later on. So let me just go within my class and write a simple line that prints hello world to the console. In Java, I can do that by saying system.out.print line. If you're new to Eclipse, know that it's trying to be helpful here and suggest possible completions for these things. You can use those if you like. Okay, let's look at what we have here. Forgot to close my quote. There we go. Okay, so I have a single line of code, system.out.print line. That is going to print the single string hello world to the console. Notice that it ends with a semicolon. Within Java, all of our function calls and most of our lines of code that aren't part of say a loop declaration or a method declaration are going to end in semicolons. So in particular, things like variable assignments, function calls, stuff like that will all end in a semicolon. It's not something you've been dealing with in Python, so you may have to adjust to that convention. Well, that rule rather. It's not a convention. It's not optional. Notice also that I don't really have to worry about white space. I can put my code over here, and Eclipse, it's going to try to format it for me nicely, but it's not going to prevent the Java code from running if I don't have it indented in a specific way. Again, in Java, we use curly braces to demarcate our function definitions and things like that, loop definitions, as opposed to indentations. So just get used to that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. I can come over to the Java file in my package explorer, and I can go down to run as Java application. And notice that when I do that, I simply get the message hello world printed out to the console. That's great. I can also now use this up here. This little button up here, this run button, will allow me to run recent things that I have run. But generally, if you're running something for the first time, the best way to do it is to go over to Package Explorer, right-click, and run as Java application. And what just happened? So, well, because I had this special main method within my class file, Java was able to see that and say that, well, you want to run this code. You're not creating any objects or anything. You just want to run the main method within it. So that's what I'm going to do. And it'll just go through and run that main method and print out the one line hello world. So that's essentially all that happens. So go ahead and make sure you go through this exercise. Make sure that you can get the same behavior to happen within your Eclipse, and then you'll have written your first Java application. All right, so that's all we're going to talk about with Java for now. We're going to get into some of the details later. If you're coming from the Python world, be sure to pay attention to the resources provided to you on the unit course website so that you can find some syntax guides, and you can see how things like if-else's or loops or things like that are done in Java as opposed to Python. So there's some of those are listed on the course website. Be sure to pay attention to those. One last thing, let me go ahead and make sure I have my code committed to GitHub before I leave you all. So let me go over to the top level here. I'm going to right-click, go to Team, and Commit. That'll bring up my Git staging window. I want to add this guy down to be staged for commit. Add a commit message. And then, as always, we want to commit and push. And there we go. Our code is now up on GitHub.